They thought you were ordinary. They thought you were replaceable. But now the silence you left is louder than any word you ever spoke. Have you ever given your heart, your time, your prayers, only to be treated like you were invisible? As if your kindness was just expected? Like your presence had no weight? But here's the truth. You were never just there. You were sent. A divine placement. An assignment from heaven itself. They didn't see it. They didn't feel it. Until you left. Until your absence turned the light off. And now, they're stumbling in the dark, realizing that what they lost was not a person. It was a divine connection. This message is not for the crowd. It's for the few. The ones who were a blessing in secret, but rejected in public. You didn't need a platform to change the atmosphere. Your spirit did the work. Your prayers built the walls of protection they didn't even know existed. And yet, they treated you as disposable. But something shifted. The air got heavier. The peace disappeared. And now, they are forced to confront the one truth they never wanted to admit. The chosen one is gone. And with that absence comes a spiritual drought. Because when you walk away, heaven's covering walks with you. You didn't lose. You didn't fail. You were removed by divine order, protected, shielded, repositioned. And those who mistreated you? They're now learning the hard way, that not every blessing is replaceable. Chosen one, if you feel this in your spirit right now, I want you to declare it in the comments. Drop a 99, because the 99 left behind will never feel complete without the one that heaven chose. And if you haven't done it yet, hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure this message reaches every chosen one who's been misunderstood, mistreated, and is now being elevated. Because what's coming next is a shift they never saw coming. Are you ready for it? They were waiting for something loud, something spectacular. A hero who would announce their arrival with power, titles, and recognition. But God doesn't operate like that. When heaven wants to shift an atmosphere, He doesn't send a celebrity, He sends a servant. And that servant was you. You didn't enter their lives with grand speeches. You didn't force your wisdom onto anyone. You simply showed up, heart open, spirit aligned, ready to give without expecting anything in return. But they couldn't recognize what was standing right in front of them. Why? Because the world is blind to quiet greatness. They only see what sparkles on the outside. But heaven wraps its greatest treasures in simplicity. While they were busy chasing noise, you were building peace. While they were looking for leaders on stages, you were leading through your actions, your patience, your quiet prayers in the background. You carried a light they were too distracted to see. And yet, that light was sustaining them. Every conversation you listened to, every moment you chose compassion over ego, every situation where you decided to stay calm while others lost control. Those were spiritual acts of warfare they never perceived. You were a barrier between chaos and peace, but they mistook your calm for weakness. They thought you were just being nice. But you were interceding. They thought you were too sensitive, but you were discerning. They thought you were passive, but you were carrying battles in silence that they would have never survived. Because God designed you to be a quiet storm, soft in appearance, unstoppable in purpose. They wanted a warrior with a sword, but God sent them a peacemaker with a shield. And because you didn't come wrapped in applause, they overlooked you. But you see, chosen one, invisibility is part of the mission. God often hides His most powerful vessels in plain sight, only revealing their true weight when they are removed. You weren't there to impress them. You were there to transform the atmosphere, even if they never noticed. But now that you're gone, everything feels different. The peace has lifted. The light has dimmed. The stability they took for granted is crumbling. And only now, Are they starting to understand that your presence was never ordinary? It was strategic. It was divine. Because the way God uses his chosen is never how people expect. He hides diamonds in the dust. He places pillars inside people they think are disposable. You were a pillar, holding up structures they never knew were fragile. But you didn't scream for recognition. You simply stood firm in the shadows, doing the work heaven assigned you. And now that your post is empty, the cracks are showing, the foundation is shaking, and the silence you left behind is shouting the truth louder than your words ever did. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. Your absence was not your end. It was your unveiling. Because what they discarded as common is about to be revealed as the very thing they couldn't survive without. Chosen one, stay with me. Because in the next moment, you'll understand why the void you left is not just emotional, it's spiritual. And the weight of that truth is about to change everything. While you were there, it all seemed effortless. The atmosphere felt light. The relationships flowed. Opportunities opened. But none of them understood why. They thought it was coincidence. They thought life was just in a good season. But what they never saw was the hidden force holding everything steady. It was you. Your presence. Your spiritual alignment. You were the anchor beneath the surface, keeping everything from drifting into chaos. You weren't loud about it. You didn't advertise your prayers. But while they laughed, you interceded. While they complained, you covered. While they sought validation, you sought heaven's favor on their behalf. You were the invisible stabilizer, the quiet shield that absorbed the storms they didn't even know were coming. But now that you're no longer there to soften the blow, the impact is direct. The arguments they used to shake off now linger. The conflicts that once resolved themselves now escalate. The peace that used to just be there has evaporated. Because the truth is, you weren't just present. You were maintaining spiritual order, and they never noticed until you left. Suddenly the air feels heavier. Simple conversations turn into tension-filled silences. The flow they once relied on has turned into friction. It's not that the world changed, it's that the covering was removed. You see, when God places a chosen one in a space, they become an atmosphere carrier. You don't just walk into a room, you shift it. Your presence brings divine alignment. But when dishonor enters, heaven withdraws what it once allowed to stay. And that's exactly what's happening now. They never thought your absence would matter, because they never understood what your presence provided. They were too busy looking at your outer simplicity, while ignoring the spiritual authority you carried quietly. But now, the weight is undeniable. The balance is gone. The lightness has turned into a dense fog. And they are beginning to realize you weren't just helpful, you were essential. Every place you prayed over, every relationship you tried to protect, every situation you handled with grace, they're now unraveling because the thread holding it all together was you. They're feeling the gaps. They're noticing the cracks. But it's not because you cursed them. It's because you were blessing them in ways they never had the maturity to see. Now the silence is their teacher. Every time they face an obstacle, your absence whispers a lesson. Every chaotic moment is a reflection of the peace you once sustained. You never wanted to be the center of attention. You just wanted to serve. But now the vacancy you left is the loudest voice in the room. They used to say, "It's not that serious." Now it feels deadly serious. They used to mock your discernment. Now they wish they had your clarity. They used to call you too much. But now they're suffocating in a spiritual drought you used to hydrate with your presence. And here's what they still don't realize. Your absence isn't a punishment. It's a revelation. It's God teaching through distance what they refuse to learn through proximity. But let me warn you, chosen one, this is only the beginning of what they're about to feel. Because when heaven removes a vessel, heaven also removes the access that came with it.
Stay with me, because in the next moment, we will uncover why rejecting a chosen one doesn't just close a door. It shifts the entire spiritual atmosphere into a season of consequence. And that is where the weight becomes inescapable. When they dishonored you, they thought they were dismissing a person. But in the spiritual realm, they were dismissing a divine connection. They saw you as just someone trying to help. But heaven saw you as a carrier of solutions they had been praying for.
They didn't realize that rejecting you wasn't a personal offense. It was a spiritual misstep, one that heaven would not ignore. You weren't there by accident. You were a sent vessel, an answer wrapped in humility. And when they chose to dishonor what God sent, they activated a law they didn't even know existed. The law of consequence, not human revenge, not karma, but divine principle. Because when you reject what God has sent to bless you, you're not closing the door on a person. You're closing the door on a move of God. That's why everything that once flowed with ease started to feel forced. That's why doors that were opening without effort are now sealed shut. It's not about bad luck. It's about dishonor creating a spiritual blockade. Where there was once peace, tension now reigns. Where there was once divine alignment, confusion has taken over. Not because you wished them harm, but because your presence was a spiritual covering, and they tore it down with their own hands. They didn't know that mocking your prayers was mocking their own protection. They didn't realize that their disrespect wasn't hitting you. It was clashing with heaven. And when that dishonor reaches a certain point, God steps in, not with loud warnings, not with thunder from the skies, but with silence. A holy silence that removes grace from environments that refuse to respect his vessels. This is not about ego. It's not about being right. It's about spiritual order. And dishonor disrupts divine order in ways the natural mind cannot comprehend. You see, God's chosen are extensions of his hands on earth. Rejecting them is like slapping away the hand that's feeding you. It's not immediate destruction. It's a slow unraveling. A gradual exposure of what happens when the covering is gone. What once was protected becomes vulnerable. What once was blessed becomes barren. And those who once felt invincible begin to feel the cracks beneath their feet. But here's the part they never saw coming. The consequence is not designed for revenge. It's designed for revelation. God allows environments that reject his chosen to experience the void, so that they may see the value they once ignored. But the longer pride holds the reins, the heavier the consequence becomes. They thought they could dishonor quietly, whisper behind your back, dismiss your value with subtle disrespect. But dishonor, no matter how discreet, speaks loud in the spiritual realm. It sends a message to heaven that says, "We don't value what you've sent." And heaven responds accordingly. The resources dry up, the peace evaporates, the opportunities stall, not out of spite, but as a mirror of their own rejection. They broke the bridge, they cut the connection, and now, the very source that was sustaining them has been rerouted elsewhere. But here's what they didn't expect, that the blessing they mistreated is now being positioned in places that will honor it. And the contrast of what they lost will become a constant reminder that dishonor is expensive, very expensive. Chosen one, I need you to understand, you were never the cause of their downfall. You were the opportunity they mismanaged. And as they sit in the tension of their own choices, God is writing a new chapter for you. One where your value will no longer be questioned. But before we get there, you need to know the silent power you carried. Because while they looked for noise, you were moving mountains in secret. Stay with me, because in the next moment, I'll show you how you were transforming lives behind the scenes, without them ever realizing it. You never needed a microphone. You never needed a spotlight. Your mission was never about applause. It was about alignment. You were placed there not to entertain them, but to transform them. And you did it in the most powerful way possible, silently. While they sought validation, you sought intercession. While they fought for attention, you fought in the spirit for their peace. They never saw the battles you fought on your knees. They never heard the prayers you whispered when no one was watching. But heaven heard, heaven saw. And because of your obedience, things shifted. You didn't stand on a stage. You stood in the gaps. The cracks they ignored. You sealed them with prayer. The wounds they laughed off. You covered them in spiritual balm. Every place that was breaking, you were quietly holding together. But they never noticed. Because your strength was hidden. Your impact was veiled. That's the mark of the chosen ones. You don't walk into a room to be seen. You walk in, and the atmosphere bends to your presence, even if no one understands why. You shifted energies. You calmed storms before they escalated. You turned chaos into calm with just a word, a glance, or sometimes just by being there. But now that you've stepped away, the dominoes are falling. The conversations that once flowed now feel forced. The peace that used to just happen now feels manufactured and fragile. They don't understand why everything feels so off. But you do. You were the invisible shield, the unannounced intercessor, the one who fought battles in silence so others could enjoy peace without ever realizing the cost. You were the reason certain disasters never happened. You were the reason opportunities kept coming their way. Not because you bragged, but because you stood in the spiritual gap for them. But dishonor has a way of unmasking what was hidden. They mocked your discernment. They laughed at your sensitivity. But now they're searching for that something that's missing. And it's your absence that keeps echoing louder and louder. They called you too serious. But now they're drowning in the very chaos you used to absorb silently. They said you overthink. But now they're making reckless decisions with no one left to bring balance. They underestimated you because they never saw what you were carrying. And let me tell you something. The enemy knew. The spiritual realm knew. That's why you were attacked so often. That's why you felt the heaviness, the exhaustion, the unseen resistance. Because while they lived in comfort, you were fighting off storms that had your name written on the victory. And theirs too. But they never knew. Because true servants don't announce their battles. They just win them quietly. And now that you're gone, they're beginning to see that you weren't just there. You were holding the spiritual structure of their lives together. Every chain you broke in silence, every atmosphere you cleaned with your prayers, was a battle they never had to face. But now the air feels heavier. The conversations are strained. The unity is fractured. Because the one who silently held it all together has been removed. And here's the mystery they're struggling to solve. How can someone so quiet, so normal, leave such a massive void? It's because heaven placed you there as a strategic anchor, not for recognition, but for divine preservation. But when dishonor meets divine assignment, God will always protect his vessel. And sometimes, that protection looks like removal. Chosen one, you were never their problem. You were their shield. But now that the shield is gone, the impact is direct. And every ripple of your absence is exposing a deeper truth they were never prepared to face. But we're not done. Because in the next moment, you'll understand why humility is the only key left that can reverse what dishonor has destroyed. The question is, will they find it in time? Or will the weight of their pride keep them trapped in a cycle of consequences they never saw coming? There's a key that unlocks every door pride has sealed shut. A force so powerful it can reverse spiritual droughts, mend fractured atmospheres, and restore what dishonor destroyed. But it's not a strategy. It's not a plan. It's humility. The only way to heal what has been broken is to kneel where ego once stood. Humility is not just an apology. It's not a shallow, "I'm sorry" to check a box. True humility is a deep internal surrender. It's the courage to look at what you overlooked To admit, I was blind, I misjudged, I dishonored what heaven sent me. And that level of honesty is rare. Because the world teaches people to fight for their pride, to double down on their opinions, to never admit they were wrong. But heaven doesn't operate in pride. Heaven moves in humility. When they rejected you, it wasn't just you they closed off. It was the flow of God's hand moving through you. And every ounce of blessing that dried up after your absence is now shouting this truth. Pride will always bankrupt what honor was meant to multiply. But the beauty is, restoration is never out of reach. It's one decision away. One moment of humility can unlock what pride has kept in chains for years. Humility is the mirror no one wants to face. It reveals the parts of us that ego has tried to hide. It confronts the illusions. And for those who mistreated you, it will take everything in them to finally see what was hidden in plain sight. They'll need to admit, that quiet presence I dismissed was a divine covering. That soft voice I mocked was a prophetic guide. That person I thought was too much was sent to hold my life together. But here's the catch. Humility will cost them their pride. And not everyone is ready to pay that price. If they choose pride, the weight will continue. The void will deepen. And the ripple effects of dishonor will keep reverberating through their lives. But if humility breaks through, healing rushes in. Because God doesn't withhold restoration out of vengeance. He waits for alignment. He waits for hearts to bow, for eyes to open, for hands to release the grip of arrogance. Once humility steps in, the spiritual blockages begin to dissolve. What felt heavy becomes light. What was stuck begins to flow. Because God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Chosen one, you are not the one who needs to beg for recognition. You were faithful. You did your assignment. But now, it's their turn to make a choice. And that choice will determine whether they continue in drought or step into a season of restoration. But here's what they don't realize yet. Humility is not just about fixing the past. It's about unlocking a future they never knew was possible. Because when they finally honor what they once rejected, the heavens respond with multiplication. The peace you carried returns. The blessings that were delayed are released. But it all hinges on one act of courage: humility. So, will they bow or will they break? The time for pretending is over. The weight has exposed the truth. Now, only humility can rewrite the outcome. But before we close this chapter, there's one last revelation you must hear, chosen one. Because your absence was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of your divine elevation. Stay with me. Because in this final moment, you'll understand why everything you endured was preparing you for a platform only heaven can give. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. They rejected you. Yes, they underestimated you, ignored you, treated you as if you were replaceable. But heaven never let you go. What for them was a discard, for God was a promotion. They saw your departure as the end, but your absence is, in reality, the opening of a heavenly stage where your purpose will be honored. What once ignored you will now feel the weight of your mission, and what once pushed you aside will witness how God elevates you in places where your value will not only be seen, it will be celebrated. The void they feel today is not punishment. It's an echo. It's the echo of the impact your presence left in their lives. They were forced to learn what you had been holding together in silence. But you are being prepared for dimensions where your essence will not be misunderstood, where your light will not be dimmed, where your mission will not be sabotaged. You were not created to fit in. You were created to shift atmospheres, to open doors that ordinary people cannot even see. And now, you are about to be positioned on platforms where every word you speak will carry eternal weight. They thought your departure would silence you. But in heaven, your voice never stopped resonating. Remember this, chosen.